catch well enough to play offense. So hope he's okay.
Right. Seriously, though, James Cook, the news starting yesterday, it looks like a hold-in has begun here. It's early. Maybe this works itself out in the form of a new contract. Maybe it works itself out in the form of him realizing he doesn't really have that much leverage, if any, and, he voices his displeasure for a few days or maybe even a few weeks, but eventually comes back in. What does this do to a player who certainly, beyond Josh Allen, is probably the top fantasy target the Bills have?
Yeah, it's certainly not ideal. Wouldn't exactly call it a surprise. I mean, James and his brother Dalton have kind of been hinting at this throughout the entire offseason. I will say where it's a little bit different than what the Commanders are dealing with Terry McLaurin's situation. The Bills don't really have a ton of that cap space, just actually lying around at this point. Certainly made plenty of big moves under the assumption that Cook was going to be suiting up for them this year. So really, again, unfortunate. I would like to think that Cook is going to do what most of these hold-ins, hold-outs end up doing, and that is suiting up and playing. But at a minimum, guys, could they at least give him some extra incentives, contracts to hopefully make a little bit more money? Because, again, I just want to see the guy get out there. As much as Ray Davis and Ty Johnson do well with their work, I mean, man, that AFC Championship game, James Cook sure as heck looked like one of the best players in that entire field.
He did, but yet we're way in the weeds on the Bills here, obviously, Ian, more than I might guess someone like yourself might be. He's not on the field at the end, though, because that's pass blocking time, and he's playing under 50% of the snaps. It's a part of the reason why I would think the Bills, why I would be, as an observer, reluctant to pay him a top of the running back market contract, because he's in a timeshare that doesn't even equate to him playing 50% of the snaps.
I hear you, and I do think there's something to be said about not devoting this super large percentage of your salary cap to the running back position. That's where this whole idea of, running backs don't matter in today's NFL comes from. They absolutely do matter, but when we have this rather arbitrary salary cap, you do have to go out of your way to, again, only devote a certain percentage of that cap to each position. It's not like college offenses, Ryan Day, Urban Meyer back in the day. It's not like they were just willingly taking 3-star athletes over 5-star guys because the position doesn't matter. So, again, I think it's an unfortunate situation. If you had to, pick and choose who you're going to pay, okay, I guess James Cook, could be someone on the outside looking in. But, man, you just gave Josh Palmer, Josh freaking Palmer, $30 million plus, and you can't hook up James Cook a little bit more. That's kind of where I draw the line.
Right, I hear you. Ian Hartitz, Fantasy Life Show. You still doing the stuff on Fubo? Can I find you there once I get ready for my fantasy drafts? Is that content still rolling out?
Sure can, man. The Fantasy Life Show, Monday through Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern, trying to be your guys' one-stop shop for all things fantasy, and maybe have a little fun along the way.
Love it, man. Yeah, that's why you're one of our favorites here. So how much would you – maybe let's try it this way. If James Cook were not here, for whatever reason, he leaves, he's so mad, he takes his ball and goes home, or, I don't know, the Bills find a way to facilitate a trade or something to a team that wants to pay him more of a market rate contract, what would that do to Ray Davis's fantasy stock? Would there be an assumption that production would rise to the level close to what Cook gave you last year, or is that too much?
Man, I think we'd see him instantly enter that top 20 conversation. We got some older heads like Alvin Kamara and James Conner. I just know how thirsty a lot of this fantasy community is for the next big young thing. And Ray Davis, man, based on that one-game sample we got last year, does fit that mold. Now, certainly Ty Johnson going to continue to be involved, and for good reason. That dude just averaged the most yards per touch of any running back in the NFL last year if you make your sample size small enough. But we did get that one game, I believe Monday night against the Jets, where basically 23 of the 27 backfield carries and targets did wind up going to Ray Davis. And it seemed, clear as day that was their plan. Funniest note, I think, was before the game. And one of the, beat reporters doing their job just kind of brought up how Ty Johnson was the first one going through warm-ups. And he was. He even took the first snap of the game for 9 or 10 yards and then barely got to touch it afterwards. So, again, it's just a situation where, no, I don't think Ray Davis is as good as James Cook. But if we are, just able to say, hey, he's going to have pretty similar volume, maybe even more because now the backfield is going to be condensed to 2 guys instead of 3. It's just a matter of, hey, that many touches and what figures to once again be one of the best scoring offenses in the NFL, really going to be hard to rank that guy too low.
We did also get some bad news from the Bills on offense at the receiver position. It's been a tough summer so far. Nothing season-ending for anyone, thank God, so far. But maybe the most serious sounding injury happened to maybe the most important guy, at least the most bankable guy, and that's Khalil Shakir on Friday night. Ian, high ankle sprain, and week to week is how the team is terming it. So we'll see. We know how that sort of injury can tend to linger. So with Shakir now on the shelf, what do you make of the receiving core? Was he the leader in the clubhouse as far as fantasy drafts go? And what happens now? Does Elijah Moore's stock go up?
Yeah, Shakir 100% was going the earliest. Now, it was still a situation where when, again, you're ranking these guys, he was usually in most people's wide receiver 40 to wide receiver 45 range, which is a far cry from what we're used to dealing with here. I mean, Stephon Diggs, obviously a top 10 option for the 4 years he spent there, but even Gabe Davis, especially after that, just incredible performance against the Chiefs. I mean, he was being ranked inside the top 30, so one of my reasons this offseason for really getting behind both Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman was the reality that we don't even have to pay Gabe Davis prices to get these dudes on the fantasy squad. So, unfortunate. I would say that as much as, a lot of fantasy people have this horrible taste in their mouth, drafted Christian McCaffrey last year, knew he was injured, and then it just snowballed and becoming something even worse. But for every one of those, there are other situations like Josh Downs, for example, who had a similar high ankle sprain to preseason, missed a game or two to start, and then went on to do big things. So, cautiously optimistic that we are going to see Shakir out there sooner rather than later based on the timeline we have right now. I'm with you. It does sound like Elijah Moore could be the next man up, but just looking at this, Bills wide receiver 4 through 9 depth chart, man, it's like a fever dream out here. Just 2019, 2020 sleepers in the fantasy world. We got KJ Hamler, LaVisca Chenault hanging out there. I'm a Columbus, Ohio man myself, so I love me some Curtis Samuel. How about we throw more passes to Terrell Shavers, man? 69 yards per target for his career. So that's a couple more.
Right. Well, you are right. There are guys here. I know this from, of course, being in these conversations with guys like yourself, but just being in a room for 20 hours a week with Mike. Those names you mentioned there, Elijah Moore may be at the top of the list. Were you an Elijah Moore? I don't want to call you a fanboy because we don't know each other that way, and that could be taken the wrong way. But were you like one of these fantasy people that just thought Elijah Moore, man, he just needs an opportunity?
A truther, if you will.
Yeah, sure.
Look, I wasn't completely down on the guy, but it was one of those things, and we kind of catch ourselves doing this throughout the months where it's like, well, if you just look between weeks 3 and weeks 9, excluding the second half here, and, only accounting for this many targets, then Elijah Moore is the wide receiver 8 or whatever. So he did flash a lot as a rookie in that Jets team. In his defense, if you had to kind of go across the NFL and say, okay, what have just been the most desperate, unusable, unwatchable passing offenses for the last 25 years, you're going to see the Browns and the Jets up pretty high. So certainly, a chance for him to finally play with plus quarterbacks for really the first time in his young career. And there's a guy that, again, despite not putting up big numbers in Cleveland, was at least good enough to still be going out there and getting triple-digit targets. One of the many guys who was certainly putting up better numbers with Jameis Winston under center. Too bad that man can't get a starting job with the other New York team. But, yeah, man, I think with Elijah, where are you going in drafts right now? Just at the very end. If you want to throw a dart out there, I'm not going to say no.
Yep. Ian Hartitz from the Fantasy Life Show, on the Western Hotline here on WGR. You mentioned Keon Coleman in that receiver pecking order, and I don't know, for what it's worth, it's not worth a whole lot, I don't think, but one day last week, I asked, my audience here, if you had to bet on someone to ascend to like a 60 catch, 6 to 10 touchdown level in the pass catcher department for the Bills. That includes your tight ends here. Who would you want to bet on? Beyond Shakir, who I think is pretty bankable, assuming his health is in order at what he gave you last year. And because the drop-off was pretty big. I mean, Shakir had like 70-something catches. The next highest might have been 44 on the team. They had a bunch of 30-catch guys. And so I'm wondering if someone's going to ascend. My bet would be on Coleman going into year 2. I don't think the skill set has really changed, but perhaps there's a little more nuance to his route running, and maybe he learned enough in 1 year. And I just think the opportunity is going to be there for him if he can stay on the field.
Yeah, I mean, when they drafted him, it was widely known, okay, this is a bit more of a project than your typical wide receiver, but obviously he was still talented enough to get that near round one draft capital. He's 22 years old, okay? Not everyone can be Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas Jr. and just light the NFL on fire pretty much the second they step out there. I really don't view last year as a sort of major disappointment that a lot of people were making out to be. Maybe, again, relative to the Lab McConkeys of the world. I know it hurts to see him go a few picks after and wonder, what could have been there. But for me, it was just impressive to see Keon show up not one, but really two different elite traits out there. I knew that the contested catches were something that he absolutely thrived on. I mean, obviously college highlights at Florida State, even going back to Michigan State, dude was, just all over the place making these incredible snags. But the yards after the catch stuff, man, was actually what really impressed me. It's really unfortunate he had that hand injury when he did because, man, those Titans and Seahawks games really did seem like he was coming out of the shell. But Next Gen Stats has a cool kind of metric. It's called yards after the catch above expected per reception. They're able to basically chart what a guy is expected to be able to get in any given catch. He was number one among all wide receivers last year. And, man, just the company that has managed to accomplish that really is incredible. I mean, Deebo Samuel, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, A.J. Brown, those are the only other guys other than Keon to actually lead this metric since 2018. So, again, we already saw Josh kind of have that ethic. Keon's down there somewhere mindset, both in the red zone and these deep balls. And then with no more Amari Cooper and Matt Collins, I think the projection you gave is fair. I'm not trying to say Keon's going to step in and put up these 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns like Diggs, but at a minimum, man, I think he could be closer to what we're all hoping Gabe Davis could be, at least in the regular season.
Yeah, so you sound pretty bullish on him. I'm encouraged to hear that. So
yeah, I've been drafting him a lot, man. He goes outside like the top 50 guys as well. So it's I always talk about opportunity costs in fantasy football. I mean, some of these guys, Shakir, for example, you're going to be taking him next to some legit starting running backs or some high-end quarterbacks and stuff. But by the time you get down to Keon, it's a situation where I'm going to bet on the guy that has a chance to beat Josh Allen's wide receiver one when it's him versus these dudes.
Yeah. One player who I was reluctant to get on board with for that idea, that question, ascending to 60 catches, 6 to 10 touchdowns, even though he eclipsed the reception number in his rookie year, is Dalton Kincaid, coming off an injury-hampered second season. I feel like last year at this time, if we'd have been talking to you on August the 4th, Ian, we would have been talking a lot about Dalton Kincaid. How are you feeling about him going into year 3?
You're not kidding, man. He was going legit, just kind of fantasy average draft position consensus, tight end 5 or tight end 6 last season. Everyone just really latching on to that first-round draft capital, still pretty wide-open offense post-Diggs. So, in his own right, the injuries weren't exactly ideal for him. It did seem like maybe those have something to do with it. But I just go back to it, and as someone that really does try to watch, every play from every game if possible, do you guys even have more than one or two key good memories from Dalton Kincaid over the past 2 years? Because I remember him pointing at those Lions defenders after making the catch. That was a lot of fun. Maybe he had that seam ball against the Patriots, but just haven't exactly been watching these games going oh, man, there's Dalton Kincaid. What a sick route. What a sick yak play once again. So, honestly, I even thought Dawson Knox in the first year or two of his career made flashier plays here and there. So, all that to say, there is some good with Kincaid. One stat that a lot of people like to talk about in fantasy circles is target per route run. Routes are a larger sample size, so guys that generally are able to earn a lot of targets on a per route basis are pretty good bets in fantasy land. And last season, he was second in targets per route run among 31 qualified tight ends. He was actually 8th in PFF receiving grade, 9th in yards per route run. The problem was the passer rating when targeted plummeted. So It's really weird to talk about anyone in Buffalo or even Kansas City. Xavier Worthy's kind of in a similar boat where it's weird when you have probably, I think we can agree, the two best quarterbacks alive right now playing for these teams and then do anything close to criticizing him. But to be fair, guys, Kincaid's uncatchable target rate from the powers that track this sort of stuff was one of the worst in the league. So, again, maybe it was more so Kincaid's fault. Wasn't exactly on the same page with Josh, whatever the issues might have been. I just do think that there is a bit more meat on the bone here, even if we don't see him necessarily have this 120 target season. So I always say, don't hate the player, hate the ADP. And again, a guy that was going top 6's position last year, you can now get as a true late round dart, man. He's going tight end 13, tight end 14.
Yeah, that lack of success targeting Kincaid was a really weird one. And, I think, there's it's one of two things. Either he wasn't healthy. I mean, it could be one of two things. It could be 25 things that neither of us have even thought of. But maybe he wasn't healthy enough, and therefore the timing was off just a little bit. Or I don't know. Maybe Allen just that's not a position. That's not a player in that part of the field that he's maybe ready to exploit. Which sounds crazy for as well versed as he is. That's what you're saying. To criticize him might be you sound like a heretic, but. I don't know. It's just a weird thing that they were as off as they were as often as they were.
Yeah, and honestly, the same thing I was kind of bringing up with Keon. Like, it's not the wildest thing in the world to see tight ends take a little bit to break out in today's NFL. Again, we've been spoiled recently. Brock Bowers, Sam Laporta have literally had two of the most productive rookie seasons that we've seen at the position in NFL history. So, I mean, if Kincaid, again, just really starts to rise year 3, year 4, it really wouldn't be all that shocking, again, in the grand scheme of things. But I, like I'm sure many of the other listeners who have been playing fantasy for any amount of time, have been hurt by that same sort of mindset with Kyle Pitts over the years. So
right.
Hopefully Kincaid doesn't go down that path.
Right. Ian Hartitz, the Fantasy Life Show is where you can find him at Hartitz on Twitter. You're a great follow on Twitter. The self-deprecation and the jokes about all these things, they totally work for me anywhere. I always love someone who can appear to not take themselves all that seriously, and so really works for me. You mentioned the Chiefs. You mentioned Xavier Worthy there in the course of talking about the Bills, and that's a team. It's been a couple years, especially last year, like the explosiveness of the offense, the passing numbers overall were down. There were injuries. Of course, Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown missed the whole year. Worthy was a rookie who kind of came on late in the year, kind of the way Rice did the year before. I feel like I want to be bracing for kind of a return to form, a little bit of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes going, oh, you don't think we know how to be explosive anymore? I might be fearing a big Chief offensive season incoming. What do you think?
I can see it, man, because, again, a lot of the reason for us hoping that last year was going to be more so the return to form that we saw in 2022 and obviously the years before that when Tyreek was there was the fact that, okay, we had year 2 Rashee Rice. They spent a first-round pick on the speedster Xavier Worthy, and even they had Hollywood Brown in there, who, when he has managed to stay healthy, has been a pretty darn good NFL receiver. So when you, again, didn't have Hollywood until, like, week 15, when Worthy, who, yes, started to play well late, but really wasn't living up to that hype for the first 2 or 3 months of the season, and then Rashee Rice is, taken out by friendly fire, unfortunately, Mahomes himself in week 4. So it's just a matter of, again, maybe not having the guys and no firepower that are used to seeing. So, to the Chiefs' credit, they were still a bad 60 minutes of football away from racking up their 3rd straight Super Bowl. And as much as the explosives weren't there, it really was still this, death by 1,000 paper cuts sort of offense. I mean, as bad as, again, the explosive pass and even run rates were, their success rates, which is, again, just kind of keeping the offense on track, converting those first downs on 3rd and shorts and things like that, they were still near the top of the league over there. So overall, though, man, I do struggle to get too behind Mahomes in these options. I mean, the defense over these past years has been so much better that I just don't think they've had to play that, same sort of high-flying brand that obviously was so fun to watch in 2018, 2019. So the saddest stat I think I've come up with this entire offseason, though, is Mahomes having the single lowest average target in the NFL during the past 2 years. That's an honor, as I use my finger quotes here. Something that we used to make fun of Daniel Jones for all the time, but with Mahomes, not quite as fun.
Right. Now the stat can't possibly mean as much if Mahomes is ranking badly in it. Couple more things on them, if you don't mind, Ian. Where are you at on Travis Kelce at this point?
So, obviously, he was a shell of himself last year. It was funny. He had that Texans divisional round game where it looked good, had over 100 yards, scored a touchdown, and then the Bills and Eagles were like, nah, we're, not going to let that even come close to happening against us these next 2 rounds. But, look, it wasn't pretty, all right? You can look at yards per target, per reception, his yak after the catches. I mean, you're in bad shape when you're a tight end. You broke fewer tackles than Zach Ertz across an entire season, okay? So, again, not trying to say that Kelce was by any stretch good last year, but he still ended up scoring the 6th most fantasy points per game at the position. So this was a guy, I think, from 2017 to 2023, he scored number one points among tight ends 5 of the 7 years or something insane like that. So, again, it's a relative drop-off from that. And if you draft him as a tight end 3 overall last year, yeah, you were disappointed in the performance, but we are getting a dip now in the kind of ADP that's associated with Kelce. He's now being priced as more so that tight end 7, tight end 8. And if we are going to see, again, Rashee Rice have to serve a bit of a suspension, I do think that could open up, the sort of volume again that managed to get him there last year. So, again, I certainly think he's way closer to wash than he is to being, still a just lethal talent at this point in his career. But that was kind of the case last year, too, and we still got some fans.
Right.
I always say style points don't matter in fantasy football, man. We just want that ball.
Right. How about their backfield? We all saw Pacheco was not really the same coming off the injury. That doesn't mean that a full off season of work couldn't get him back to being that back. But how do you see the Kansas City back? Kareem Hunt is still back. I'm not sure that's a good idea. What do you think of their backfield?
Yeah, they got Elijah Mitchell there from the 49ers. Brashard Smith has some truthers out there, just like seemingly every rookie running back this year. But, that's the way the draft works. Everybody loves everybody. So, whatever. I'm not going to ruin those good vibes. But, look, I've kind of gone back and forth on this throughout the offseason. So, on the one hand, Pacheco, those first 2 games before he got injured last year, the dude went out there and had 42 combined carries and targets. The season before that, he did actually turn in top 15 numbers in terms of PPR points per game. So, I would like to believe that now a healthy version of Pacheco is going to resume that workhorse role in an offense that, again, with how much they love screens and obviously feeding them near the goal line, could bring out the best in them. But, as much as Kareem Hunt certainly wasn't the same guy last year, it hasn't been the same guy the last few years, I do think that there is going to be a team out there that remembers the good days and is going to use them a bit more than they should. Probably would be Andy Reid and the Chiefs. So, again, throwing guys like Smith and also potentially Mitchell, if he can stay healthy for once, I think there's enough concern where, again, we can't exactly fire up Pacheco as one of these guys that were going out of our way to draft in the early rounds. But the good news is some of this uncertainty I'm talking about has led to him being priced more so as just like RB27, RB28, depending on where you're playing. So I do think, if we kind of have the fantasy football genies say, like, hey, is there one sort of like snap count for like a position group that you could look ahead in time and see in week 1? This Chiefs backfield will be up there, man. Because, again, drafting Pacheco where he's going, I could see us by week 2 saying, oh, yeah, great, 20 combined carries and targets. We are looking at legit RB1. Or Kareem Hunt's going to trot out there at the goal line. We're going to see Brashard Smith out there on long third downs, and all of a sudden he's an unusable player. So one of the more interesting backs out there. I do think, though, that range of outcomes, exactly what you should be looking to target if you are doing one of these 0 RB strategies, loading up a wide receiver zone.
Ian, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate the work. I mean everything I said earlier about enjoying you as a follow. And keep it up, and we'll talk